On a cold winter morning in 1991, a man in rural Victoria is sprinting up a muddy hill, convinced he's about to save his friend's life. When he gets to the top, he finds his friend lying still in the dirt, with a gun in his hand and no pulse. His friend was a dad, a husband, and one of the most celebrated heroes in Australia. But as people are trying to process his death, investigators quietly realize something else. This is not the first time this man has died. July 26, 1991, just outside the town of Sale in rural Victoria, a man named James Burnside is driving like a madman from one spot to another, trying to find his friend. He finally pulls up near a steep hill that overlooks the Gippsland countryside. The weather is miserable, the ground is wet, mist is hanging low over the paddocks. James starts climbing. At first he walks, then he jogs, then he's basically sprinting. His heart is hammering, his shoes are sliding in the mud, and halfway up, he slips and drops to his knees. He looks up, and that's when he sees him. At the top of the hill, a man is lying motionless in the mud. His clothes are soaked, his body is completely still, and in one hand, there is a gun. James knows instantly who it is. This isn't some stranger, this is his friend, a devoted husband, a father of three, and to most people in Australia at the time, a hero. His name is John Friedrich. John was the CEO and driving force behind the Victorian division of the National Safety Council of Australia, the group that in the 1980s was considered one of the world's leading search and rescue organisations. This was a man who had spent years trying to save other people's lives, and now it looked like he had ended his own. John's friends and family are shattered. For them, this is the tragic end of a good man's life. But very soon, investigators and journalists are going to discover that this hill in Gippsland is not the first place John Friedrich has died. To understand how that's even possible, we have to go back to the beginning of the story. According to John Friedrich, he was born on 7 September 1945 in a tiny place called Mount Davis in South Australia. He grew up modest, hard-working, and family-oriented. The quiet, soft-spoken guy with this stubborn roll-up-your-sleeves determination. In the mid-1970s, he lands a job as a safety engineer with the Victorian division of the National Safety Council of Australia, or NSC. Back then, it's a fairly small outfit, mainly doing road and workplace safety education. But John doesn't see a boring safety committee. He sees a blank canvas. He works insane hours, he's charming, he's organised, his colleagues love him. By 1982, he's climbed all the way to executive director of the NSC's Victorian division. And this is where the story starts to feel like a movie. John isn't interested in just putting out pamphlets and running workshops. He starts cutting through red tape, making bold calls, and transforming this little safety council into a full-blown emergency response organisation. Helicopters, medical teams, elite search and rescue units. If there was a way to save people in danger, John wanted it. In 1983, when the Ash Wednesday bushfires tear through parts of Victoria and South Australia, the NSC's helicopters join in the firefighting effort, ferrying equipment and personnel in brutal conditions. The public sees these red and white helicopters in the smoke and flames, and they remember the name, National Safety Council. Under John's leadership, the NSC goes from a mostly volunteer, low-profile body to an outfit with a fleet of helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, deep-sea diving units, and even midget submarines. Government agencies are impressed. The Defense Department gives the organization contracts, and John gets security clearances that allow him access to sensitive facilities. By 1988, he's awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for his services to the community. By the late 1980s, if someone vanished at sea or went missing in the mountains, there was a very good chance John's organization would be the one risking their lives to bring them home. John Friedrich looks like the textbook definition of a selfless hero, which makes what happens next almost impossible to believe, because behind the helicopters, the medals, and the headlines, something else is quietly growing. On the surface, John's operation looks like the ultimate feel-good story, but if you look closely, there are hairline cracks showing. People start to notice the NSC doesn't just have rescue choppers in gear, it has deep-sea recovery vehicles, decompression chambers, and a multi-million-dollar airbase that includes a jet and a former gunship. Staff are wearing uniforms and red berets. They're practicing tactical maneuvers. At a certain point, people start asking, is this a civil emergency organization or a paramilitary one? And then there's the bigger question, where on earth is the money coming from to pay for all this? That part at first has a simple answer: banks. In the 1980s, Australia's financial sector is going through deregulation. Banks are lending aggressively, chasing big returns and trusting glossy reputations. John's NSC looks like the perfect client. It's high profile, media friendly, and seen as a public good. So the banks start lining up. Some arrange complex leasing deals, others extend huge lines of credit. The State Bank of Victoria alone ends up with exposure of over $100 million to the NSC. But here's the weird part. While the organization is drowning in expensive gear, John himself does not live like a rich man. He's modest, no luxury cars, no mansions, no obvious piles of money. Almost everything he gets goes straight back into the organization. In 1989 though, those tiny hairline cracks suddenly widen. During a routine audit, accountants noticed two small discrepancies, just $6,500 each in the NSC's books. On their own, it's nothing, but when they look closer, the numbers don't feel right. The board decides to give John a chance to explain. They call a meeting, and John declines to attend. This is the first really loud alarm bell. The chairman, Max East, calls the other board members and the accountants into a room. An accountant flies a document across the table. On it, one line of assets is circled in red: containerized safety equipment. Max frowns and says, "What exactly am I looking at?" And the accountant tells him, "That, Mr. East, is your collateral, and as far as we can tell, it doesn't exist." Max is furious. He decides to confront John face to face. He walks into John's office, shuts the door, and drops a thick file onto the desk. "John, we need to talk. You're coming to the board on Friday, in person, no more notes, no more delays." John opens the file and flips through the pages. He knows exactly what he's looking at. When he looks back up, the usual easy charm is there, but his knuckles are white around the paperwork. "Of course," he says, "you have my word." John does not keep his word. In fact, he resigns and then disappears completely. The moment John vanishes, this stops being a messy audit and becomes national news. He is now officially a wanted man. A nationwide and even international manhunt is launched. A Supreme Court order forbids him from leaving the country. Federal police are watching passenger lists. State police are on alert. His face is suddenly everywhere, on TV and newspapers, described as possibly Australia's greatest con man. John spends his first night on the run at a travel lodge in Melbourne, where he shaves off his beard, trying to change his appearance. Sitting alone in a motel room, he has to confront reality. His life as a national hero is gone. The thought of abandoning his wife and 3 kids is almost unbearable, but he also knows if he stays, he is going to prison. After a long night of thinking, he calls a trusted friend from the NSC and simply says, "I need to get out of Victoria now." The friend drives him to Albury the next morning. There, under the false name Ian Hoskin, John buys a blue Ford wagon in cash. Then he starts driving west across the continent, alone. While John is out on the road, the accountants are tearing apart the NSC's books. What they find is that containerized safety equipment that was supposed to be stacked in sealed shipping containers around the country. Some containers are empty, others hold random gear, many don't exist at all. On paper, they're worth a fortune. In reality, they're nearly worthless. Investigators also discover many of the organization's trade debtors, companies supposedly owing money to the NSC, are partly or completely fictitious. In the end, they find John has borrowed money from 27 financial institutions, using these phantom assets as collateral. The total, about $293 million, is not just a fraud, it's one of the largest and most infamous corporate frauds in Australian history. And yet, the money is not in some Swiss account. Almost all of it has been poured into the NSC itself. Planes, helicopters, submarines, bases, communications, trained teams. A rescue empire built on lies. The National Safety Council is finished. There are virtually no real assets. Operations are shut down, volunteers stood down, projects are cancelled. The reputation of this once beloved organization burns to the ground. Meanwhile, John makes his way to Kalbarri, a small coastal town in Western Australia. He has outrun the law, but not his conscience. He starts writing long, emotional letters to his family. What he doesn't know is the police have placed a mail alert on his family's address. When one of his letters is intercepted, Western Australian police begin to close in. After about 16 days on the run, John travels down to Perth. He is exhausted, constantly looking over his shoulder, running low on cash. His nerves are shot. One day, a member of the public notices his strange behavior and calls police. Officers approach him. John looks at them and smiles. It's as if he's relieved to finally be caught. The man who once inspired headlines as a hero is now locked in a cell, facing almost 100 fraud-related charges. But as big as this fraud is, it's not the strangest thing about John Friedrich. Once John is in custody, investigators start digging into his background, and what they find is nothing. There's no valid Australian birth certificate. He's not on any electoral roll. The man the public knows as John Friedrich from Mount Davis, South Australia, appears not to exist at all. Eventually, records in Europe point to a different name, Friedrich Johann Homburger, born in Munich, West Germany in 1950. According to this version, in the early 1970s, Homburger works for a road construction company in Germany. He forges orders for fake road projects and siphons off hundreds of thousands of Deutsche Marks. When the fraud is discovered, a warrant is issued for his arrest. But before police can grab him, he goes skiing in Italy and never comes back. His bags are found later, but he isn't. Authorities suspect he either had an accident or used that accident to vanish. Shortly after, a man calling himself John Friedrich appears in Australia using fake credentials. He works on the Melbourne Rail Loop, then as a community advisor at a remote Aboriginal settlement in South Australia, where he meets his future wife, Shirley. Within a year, he's working for the National Safety Council. When this story breaks that the beloved rescue hero might actually be a German fraudster who faked his own death, people who thought they knew John are stunned. John, for his part, denies it. He insists he is not Homburger. Then he makes things even stranger by hinting he's involved in espionage, claiming a codename Yargo, and suggesting some of what he did at the NSC was connected to secret missions, claims that have never been verified. At the same time, questions swirl around some of the NSC's operations. Why, for example, was the NSC doing surveillance of protesters at places like Pine Gap and the Omega transmitter site, both tied into the US defense network? How did John get such broad security clearances and access to sensitive defense facilities? His clearances, multiple passports, and mysterious backstory fuel rumors the NSC might secretly have been some kind of intelligence front. But despite all the theories, no solid evidence of this has ever been found. Whatever the truth, by 1990, John is convinced someone wants him dead. And one night, something happens that seems to support his paranoia. Just before 1 a.m. on the day he is supposed to appear at a liquidation hearing for the NSC, his wife Shirley shakes him awake. "John, wake up," she whispers. "I think I heard something at the front of the house." Half asleep, he tells her it's nothing. She insists someone is out there. John gets out of bed and creeps toward the front door in the dark. His heart is pounding. He puts his hand on the doorknob, opens it just a crack, and peers into the night. At first, he sees nothing. Then suddenly, a volley of gunshots rips through the door and the front of the house. John dives for cover and crawls towards the phone to call police. When he reaches it, the line is dead. It's been cut. Whoever did this wasn't trying to scare him. They were trying to kill him. No one is ever charged over the attack, but incidents like this make it even harder to untangle truth from fiction. To some members of the public, John is now clearly a con man who pretended to be a hero. To others, the really scary possibility is the opposite, that he might genuinely be a hero caught in someone else's lie. After his arrest, John is extradited back to Victoria. He's granted bail and allowed to live quietly on his small property near Sale while he awaits trial. He's facing a long list of fraud charges, with his own lawyer estimating he could get around 5 years in prison if convicted. And because he is not a legal Australian citizen, he could also be deported back to Germany to face additional charges. The man who once flew in rescue helicopters and shook hands with politicians is now unemployed, broke, and heavily medicated for anxiety and depression. The life he built, the organization he lived for, and the reputation he once enjoyed are all gone. On the morning of July 26, 1991, John leaves his house quietly. He crosses the road into a neighbouring paddock and begins walking up the steepest hill in the district. At the top, he can see the Gippsland countryside spread out around him, the same skies where NFC helicopters once flew life or death missions under his command. He sits for a moment in stillness. Then a single gunshot echoes across the paddocks. Later that day, police find John lying in the mud with a gunshot wound to his head and the firearm in his hand. The death is ruled a suicide. His lawyer and some others insist that just days earlier, John had told them he had no intention of killing himself. But no evidence ever emerges to prove any other explanation. And so, officially, this is where John Friedrich's story ends. In the end, the National Safety Council's rescue empire is dismantled. The real helicopters, the real rescues, the genuine lives saved are overshadowed by a legacy of lies and one of the biggest corporate frauds the country has ever seen. But even with the fraud exposed and the body in the paddock, there are questions that just won't die. Did he build the rescue empire purely as a front, or did he start with good intentions and lose control trying to keep it all going? Were his stories about secret missions and intelligence work just fantasy, or is there some hidden truth that explains how he gained such extraordinary trust and access? No matter how you look at it, the death of the man we call John Friedrich is a tragedy. But the big question is, do you think the person lying in the mud that day was really John Friedrich? Or was he someone else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story gripped you, hit like and subscribe for more mysteries from Down Under After Dark.